Okay.
Okay, we are live this morning to Senate Transportation Committee. And our first item this morning is Andrea Wright. We're our guest this morning. So what would you like to perform us this morning? Start off the new year.
Yeah, we're gonna start off the new year, start off the session. It's going quick already. So yeah, I'll be providing a presentation with Ernie and Jeremy over there on V-Trans blood recovery from this past year. And then if we have time, I will also go into some of our resilience planning work that we're doing. And if we don't have time, I think we'll have plenty of time to do that in the next session that I am presenting.
We won't be taking a break at 10:15, so just a few more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I'm Andrea Wright. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager in the PPAID division, so policy.
Are you familiar with everyone around here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then again, here with me is Ernie, Director of Maintenance, and Jeremy, who is the Chief Engineer and Highway Division Director.
Well, there's no maintenance going on highway and transportation this year. There's been no water.
No.
Pretty boring.
Very
boring.
Pretty boring year.
Yeah, even tonight would just be
driveway
boring.
that?
Yeah.
No retirements, no nothing.
Is there any part of the state that didn't get hit by some sort of flooding? Wow, everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy couldn't even get home.
Wow. Okay, you're right ahead.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start things off by setting the stage in really a broad sense. There's a lot going on at the Agency for Resilience. Some of the things are really institutionalized and some of the things are quite new. Really all of it is evolving as we strive to work in and keep up with the changing climate that we're experiencing. So we have sort of 4 buckets that we kind of lump or categorize our resilience work into. For emergency response and recovery, we have a continuity of operations plan that involves assessing all agency critical missions and functions, and then analyzing how to continue those safely and efficiently and effectively when need be. We work under an incident management system that uses the incident command structure, which is an organizational structure to manage and direct the agency's overall response and recovery priorities. It talks about how to modulate information flow, allocate resources, and make those tactical decisions that need to be made in the field during an emergency. We have a manual that talks about FHW emergency response funding, and that outlines the actions of responsible staff during an event, really from the very beginning to the end. We have emergency procurement and contracting procedures, and that makes it possible to really quickly hire the contractors and consultant support that we need during an event. So that's something that really makes things go a lot more efficiently in our response actions. For planning and programming, resilience is addressed through our larger systems plans, our long-range transportation plan, the asset management plan. It's in the rail plan and the transit plans, sort of interspersed throughout, because it really does touch all things.
Well, I'm just thinking about past events, starting with Irene forward, and things that we put in place, and is looking at your planning and and design and engineering. Are there certain things that we learned? For example, the big culvert in Brandon was attributed to avoiding flooding this time. When Irene took it, created a lot of flooding. On the other hand, so many of our roads follow the rivers.
Yeah.
And so my question is, as you're looking at your planning, are there certain areas of our transportation infrastructure that are identified as high risk for these kind of climatic events that seem to be hitting us in more frequency?
Yeah.
And then what can we do? We were talking about that whole section along the White River that was the last to open. When we replaced it, were there things that were done at that time to mitigate future flooding?
Yeah.
And I think, that's really what we're trying to understand. how that's influencing
Yeah.
work, identification of segments that still are at great risk, and then how you take the engineering and apply it
Right.
as you're developing your plan.
Yeah, and this slide is really just to set the stage for all the different things that are happening, and we'll get into a lot more detail. Me with some of the planning work that we're doing and the tools that we're using, and then Jeremy will talk about design standards that help us be more resilient.
I remember after Irene, actually Vermont engineers went to Colorado because the big
Yep.
Thompson Canyon
Yep.
blew out. But if you look at the geography of that road up to Estes Park, there are a lot of limitations just because of the geography and
Right.
So forth. And so I how you engineer to those conditions, I guess, is for me kind of like how do we design and engineer smarter, anticipating the future.
Yeah, and a lot of that did come out of what we learned during Tropical Storm Irene, and like I said, Jeremy will definitely get into that.
You must have gone up Big Thompson, right, when you were growing up in, right, Estes Park, yeah.
Same brain valley, same issue.
Yeah.
And I will definitely talk about that. The tools that we used when we did our resilience improvement plan. We also provide training and education and talk about those tools, get into more detail about those. We worked with A&R to develop a training after Tropical Storm Irene, the Rivers and Roads training program. You've probably heard about that along the way. We have, again, the Transportation Resilience Planning tool that talks about our vulnerabilities. I'll go into that a little bit more, and our repeat damages tool also. And then resilience is also incorporated into our project selection and prioritization systems now.
Is that new? I know you cover it later, the repeat damages.
Yeah.
That's a new tool this year.
Not this year. A couple of years ago, it was a federal highway requirement to develop that. To develop some sort of system for that. So for design and engineering, we've worked with A&R to update our design standards in our hydraulics manual. We accommodate bank full width so that we make sure that we're designing and engineering to pass debris, which really is a cause of a lot of failure during our events. They get hung up, debris washing down streams get hung up and either wash out the structures or wash out around the structures. We have the town highway bridge standards, and that is to encourage municipalities to adopt these. And if they do, they have a lessened match for rebuilding, and they can rebuild to a more durable and resilient standard and get reimbursed for that through FEMA PA program. And then we have just our infrastructure investments. We have our traditional funding through our structures and bridges and our slope stability type of projects. But we also have new funding through the IIJ Protect Formula program, and they have a grant program, discretionary grant program as well. And then we also look for opportunities to apply for FEMA grants, and we have several projects that we're working with local entities on different projects through several different types of grant programs that they offer. So again, really broad overview there, and I am going to hand it over to Ernie first, and then Jeremy to go through some more detail about those. And then again, if we have time, I will get into our planning, but if we don't, I can also cover it in the next session, that carbon reduction and protect.
Okay, questions? Okay. Morning, Ernie.
Good morning, for the record, Ernie Patno, Director of Maintenance. Happy to be here. Glasses.
Have an interesting few months, have you?
A little bit. It just doesn't seem to let up, but we're always ready. We're ready for tonight. Just never know. You just never know.
How's the labor situation? You got full staff or?
We're pretty short up in the Chittenden County area. We're a little bit short down along the Massachusetts border, and we're a little bit short in the White River Junction area. Anywhere that there's big business right close to us, it's a tight market.
Figure it'd be a tight market now.
Very tight market. So yeah, we're covering those, vacancies with volunteers, temporary employees, and people that have CDL licenses from other divisions.
Are the drivers mostly, or is it all positions?
No, it's mostly drivers.
Yeah, CDL drivers.
Yes, CDL drivers are in very high demand right now, very high demand.
School transportation suffers. You know, there's a saying, it's better to be ready and not be called than be called and not be ready.
Yes,
Yeah, so.
absolutely. I have spent 27 years in maintenance for V-Trains, all about 23 of those years is in the northwest corner here of Vermont, and then 4 years statewide. So yes, we're always ready. We're ready for tonight. We're ready for whether it be rain, snow, trees coming down. We'll be ready. We'll shift on the fly like we do, so.
You guys did a fantastic job on this last storm in our area. Just, I was coming home last night, just amazed on what you guys do. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. The men and women they take a lot of pride in taking care of the roads.
You know,
and we're lucky to
I've
have
said this time and time again, I've commuted from Danville to Montpelier or Waterbury since 1973. Maybe you weren't even born then.
No, I was. I was, but thank you.
I've never not made it because of the weather, winter weather. The only time was, I don't know, back in the 80s that we got some flooding and you couldn't come through Hardwick, you couldn't come through 302, you just couldn't come in. One day, and it had to do with flooding the road, but never have I not made it because of the snow. And I think that's fairly
You're right.
fairly indicative of how good a job we have keeping our roads open.
You know, we get those questions all the time. There's people coming, and I get some folks from Texas now, and they are always, well, you know, we hear you get a lot of snow. I said, we know snow. Don't worry about it. We know how to take care of that.
We do know stuff.
We do know snow.
So I'm gonna buzz through a lot of these slides because the meat and potatoes really lies with Jeremy and Andrea's planning and resiliency tools and stuff. So this is just a brief overview of our mileage, which is behind us. Okay, just making sure. This is interstate highway, U.S. highway, state highway systems, class 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, town roads.
You don't plow anything below the class 2.
No, actually, so we do the interstate, US highway, and state highway, and then class 1 town highway and down would be the town. And class 1 town highway would be similar to, say like Route 100 where it runs through Stowe, Vermont.
Right.
The
Or
village.
Like Route 2 where it runs through the village. You do that.
Yeah, and no, yeah, that one. So every road is different, whether the township wanted to take over their portion and have it kind of like under local control. That would
There's
be,
no too far lower that's what the state does.
we don't do class 1s either. That's all town.
So all the town
Oh,
highways.
because those are state highways.
They're state numbered highways, but the town opted to take care of them, to kind of be in sort of local control
We
of,
did that in Brattleboro, for example, we gave a segment, for example.
yes, it's all over, there's many
Same, I think,
places.
in Norwich because of the way the trails turned around.
Yeah.
We plow the notch over.
Yeah. That up. So somebody can get stuck in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we plow it.
The next slide just dips into our incident command structure when we run into a major event, so everybody doesn't go their own direction. We bring everybody into a transportation incident command center. The second slide.
Who's the commander of your command center?
So it normally will be the chief engineer, which would be Jeremy Reed. And so we activate, we have a pre-planned activation, so we don't even have to think about activation. Everybody knows their role. You activate the transportation incident command center. We all report to the same place. And then we stay in those rooms.
You come physically.
Yes. And then we'll put up a screen, a war room, if you will. The slide in black behind me, that's very common. It's the common operating procedure. Matt?
You gotta go with Jake.
Oh, I'm sorry. What, oh, it's advancing on the computer, but it's not advancing.
Now it's
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. So this would be in that room, and this is also public facing, and this is real time. When we hear of a report, that changes. That auto populates 511, all the public facing maps, and it keeps everybody on the same page
And again, just the state highways and above.
and above, yes.
So during the July flood, I had towns that people were saying, how do I know what's going on with all the other roads? And they understood why the state didn't want to take over doing this for all the roads, but they wondered if there was any way for people to upload data
From towns?
from towns on local road closures. And has the DOT think about that, or has that been addressed at all, like from towns? Because this is a very good website, but it only tells you part of the story. If you need to get to one of these roads, you might go 4 different roads to find out they're all closed.
It has been discussed, but it's a smidgen out of my wheelhouse, I'm afraid, and I would have to get somebody a little bit more in tune with this
Right.
to actually give you
Like
accurate,
school closures with the script.
Yeah.
unless you folks can help me out, but I'm thinking Tismo Group.
Yeah, I mean, so this will show the class ones, generally speaking.
Yes,
It gets a little bit more difficult on the class 2s and 3s because that would be dependent on the towns actually reporting, right? So I'm not even sure technologically if it would work. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't. That being said, we can only post the information we have.
And is this posted to the public?
yes, this is public facing. And the best part is also what we're operating from. So it's common procedure, right straight across the board.
So what was this from? The last storm?
This one was from the July storm. Yep. This was just a quick snapshot of where we were at that particular day.
So like, well, Route 9, we have the chain requirement now. That would go on this dashboard, or
So,
where
so,
would that?
so this only goes when we're under the
Oh,
operating
okay, that's-
under the ICS command system, but that would go under our 511 website, which is also, that's a nationwide program. This shows the amount of damages that was done in the towns. These are our dashboards. This information goes real time. This was just a snapshot in time that day for this slide. And as our technicians are out in the field assessing damage, this is real time. So if they put in something for 1.2 million, this goes up real time in that county. If they put in something for 25,000, real time. Right up through. We have our
Grand Isle, no data. Huh.
It could have been because,
No damage.
so I actually volunteered to come out of the Northwest to help out with the flooding. And we had a little bit of damage down on the Wrong Way Bridge and a couple other small things, and
We're surrounded by water with a lake.
we were surrounded by water.
My area, it would never flood my place, the lake is right there across the street.
Yeah, and something that's kind of interesting about the Northwest, the Lamoille, the Missisquoi, some of the bigger rivers, it takes them a long time to come up,
Oh, yeah.
and then it takes them a long time to go down. And so the damage normally would be from the smaller streams. So we got lucky in the Northwest on that event. This is just a quick slide showing that in some places we got up to 9 inches of rain in 2 days. And everybody knows the devastation. We had 212 swift water rescues through, let's see, in 3 days. So that was.
What's that mean, swift water rescue? I mean,
They had to launch swift water rescue boats 212 times in 3 days.
To people, I mean,
People.
houses
Get out of their
nearby.
home.
Yep, houses,
Oh, I
people
see.
that didn't get out of their homes, or the river came up so fast they didn't have the opportunity.
Oh, okay.
So they performed 212
Wow.
swift water rescues.
And interesting, in Montpelier, State Street, the river goes right under a building.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to see what that looks like on the backside. Have you ever?
Yeah, you can kind of see it if you get toward the confluence and you look upstream of the
Where it goes
North
under?
Branch, you can see the bricks. It's not like in the building, it's just like the.
No, I know,
The
I mean,
building was a bridge.
yeah, I'm sure of that, but,
And there's a nice little dam over there as well. You ever see that over there? I remember we were kids, we would go over there, and we'd actually fish where that would come
Oh, yeah.
through, yeah.
Yeah, there's little weirs that, which we would like to take out.
but
Give us some more money in a.
Sarducci's did not flood.
No, kidding.
But is it because of the West Branch? Was it, that's where the flooding occurred
Yeah.
as opposed to the Winooski itself? The North Branch?
Yeah, right, kind of where the North Branch and Winooski meet, which you could almost see in
Well, it
that
was-
picture, is from there down and then low-lying areas. It kind of almost came back.
Yeah.
up. Just outside of that photo is where the North Branch is.
Yeah, talking with Vince, because he's got a building up there, and that's how it flooded it. That West Branch would come, and then the Winooski had risen so high, and the West Branch just didn't
And nowhere to go.
have nowhere to go, so it started backing up.
And that's what flooded Montpelier, was the West
That's
Branch?
what, yeah,
Well, it's
That's
really
what- well-
Winooski, but all that water from the North Branch coming in
Uh-huh.
just had nowhere to go, so that's where it came over the banks. And then from there down, and then it really flooded kind of uphill from there as it got deeper.
Well, you certainly saw people paddling around. It looked like Venice there for a day.
Quick slide, we had over 2,000 unique damage sites that were identified from the quick initial scatter out and see what there is for damage. 300 miles of roadway were closed. 149 miles of the rail trails were closed, 93 of which were the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, which interestingly enough, was slated to open,
Yeah.
Oh, no,
That-
the governor had to postpone. Well, they have to do it this summer.
yes.
So it's-
And again, that 300 miles is just the class 1 and up. That doesn't include the town roads, the class 2.
That does not include any town roads. That is correct.
It's probably double that, if not more, I would say.
It certainly could be, but yes, so we had 300 miles of roadway closed now. We scrambled, I mean, we opened roads as quickly as we could. That number came down very quickly,
I was impressed.
very quickly. We had 409 miles of rail travel were closed, and we had 29 temporary bridge requests throughout the state.
How many temporary bridges do we have?
So we have an inventory of linear feet, so it matters whether it's 50 or 100, how many. Now, interestingly enough, during this flood versus Irene, we used all of our single lane bridge that we would deploy for
Yeah.
towns. We used every
Marshfield, We
piece.
called and they were like, well, we might not have any, but we did get the 3 we needed, but.
You did.
For a while, they were like, gee, I don't know if we have it.
You did, and so we ordered some new bridge. It's supposed to be here today, actually. We've purchased some and we've rented some in case this spring there is more flooding. And we have about 1,000 feet of 2-lane bridge in stock right now for emergencies. So we're good for the state system, a little shy on the town system.
Rail got back pretty fast, didn't they?
Rail got back
I saw one, it was 19 days and had it back.
incredibly fast, and they had,
And the whole rail was gone.
yes, I think I have,
Only-
Yeah, you have that picture, yeah.
But
Yeah, we
that
do.
one segment being taken out would close a lot of
Yeah.
mileage.
they're the towns that we, put the bridges out on. We had some, rental bridges also deployed, from contractors that happen to be in the area.
Marshville needed 4, Hardwick 3.
Let's see.
I think that might be
I
back.
even got, Hardwick, Pete Buttigieg came to Vermont.
Yes,
Mhm. There,
Were you there?
yeah, I was.
You a picture of it?
Well, yeah, I think I might have been. And.
so we had about $300 million in, initial damage collected.
Look at that now, where's that section there?
That one I think is 106, but
Wow.
please don't hold me to it. I do have some incredible pictures coming up.
Wow.
But
Let's
that
see.
just shows the hill, the steepness and there must be a river along here
So
somewhere.
this is the rail trail. Most of this is Hardwick Walden area.
Mhm.
It was devastating in the Hardwick area what happened to the rail trail. Let's see. So here's some more of the slides. Yep, that is also Hardwick, Wolcott, Walden area.
And were all these drone footage from the AOT's drone?
They were, it is. There's the reference that Senator Mazza was making, referring to, that was
Kind of hanging.
an I mean, to be there, that hole is 60 to 70 feet deep.
They had it back running, said 19.
They did.
Boy, that took some work.
It did.
Wow.
So
Where was that? Was the road?
and this is more rail trail. Oh, no, sorry. This is down here in Montpelier and Berry City for the rail. That sustained a lot of damage. Let's see, I want to make sure. Yeah, so this was our facility at the central garage. The main garage had about 30 inches of water inside the garage. This is our training center, and in the back of the building, the water was over all of these desks. It doesn't quite show on the pictures, but the water was closer to 40 to 44 inches deep in there.
Anything you could do for future, I mean, we have these incidents, what do we do for the future?
Yep, so the secretary would be happy to talk about that. They are doing everything they can not to go back to that
You
location.
never know what's gonna happen again.
Yeah, it's just flooded too many times.
Could happen in 6 months or 2 years.
As you drive by the complex, I don't know if anybody's noticed, there's an elevated building kind of in the middle of the parking lot. So temporarily, we're working out of that building. And all the rest of the buildings were stripped out. The sheetrock was all cut. They've been put to bed, if you will, but nobody's in them. So there was 6 structures impacted in the central garage. There was 1 total loss. That building had actually started to collapse. It's been taken down. We had 14 vehicles that were impacted. People scrambled to the site to move everything we could, but the water came so fast. It was like in this photo here, those trucks were taken, as you can see, there's no wheels on them. So we couldn't get them back together in time. So we did lose 3 vehicles, and we're gonna be able to repair 11. So 14 vehicles were impacted.
There's no answer for that one in the central garage, you gotta stay there, you just gotta.
No, you're gonna move it.
They're looking for options now, and the secretary has some planning. I'm not sure where he is with it.
Okay.
So this is 106 in Cavendish.
What is the river there?
Oh, boy.
Black,
Is it the Black?
black.
Reading on 106. You can see the power. Many landslides. The secretary was talking to somebody from the geology department, and they said that the ground saturation right now is the equivalent of the 1927 flood for Vermont. This will be the largest ground saturation in history for Vermont. And we are having this happen just out of the blue. I mean, not this magnitude, but somebody will call and say, hey, you got to slide up in Marshfield, that one next to there, and they're just happening. They're just happens.
There was one here in St. Johnsbury on Route 2.
Yep.
Yeah, the scale of that, you can see the people and then right there on the edge is just so big.
Yep, that is a large one.
I'm glad I'm on ledge. The water goes right through my cellar, right down on a hill, down into Walden Hill Road.
This is the Hardwick Hotel, right
I
along.
know, that was tragic.
They had it.
In the river.
It looked so nice. They had that place looking
I know,
so
I know,
nice.
Wow, lost the whole thing.
Yeah,
There's some,
it had already been moved once and they just, there wasn't enough room between the road and whatever. Of course, right across from that was quite a landslide.
Yes.
Yeah.
so we've done 153,000 feet of ditching. We've paved 34 miles of road, the deployed bridges. We've we've replaced 94 culverts. We've cleaned 839 culverts, 214 slopes, almost 500,000 tons of stone, and 14,000 feet of guardrail.
So where the Ludlow train track,
Yes.
Was that state had to repair that, the state online?
Yeah.
So that would have taken quite a bit of your stone
Yes.
to fill that hole.
So when you make a decision like the Brandon culvert, where you went to the size that would help mitigate any future damage, when your whole team from everybody makes a decision that that's the size of the culvert or whatever needs to happen, is that decision made within, who could say, no, you guys can't do that? Is that a fairly easy decision to be made? If you guys get to that point and say, this is where it's at, you can make that decision without much pushback from anybody else?
Yeah, it's our standards.
Yeah.
So it's our standard bridge design. So if we're gonna replace culvert or bridge or whatever,
Right.
we're looking at those standards. Jeremy's gonna go into all the
Yeah.
detail.
I mean, it's not really discretionary at this point. We have design standards. So you do the hydraulic modeling and the result is the result. Potentially in an emergency scenario, we may go smaller, but by and large, A&R's on board with our standards as they are. They meet the FEMA floodplain requirements. So it's not an individual decision. That's just how we operate now.
So it's not a permitting, once you can get to that decision, you guys you can do it. You don't have to wait for FEMA's okay or even the federal okay or anything. It's once your process is played out, you can do it.
Well, so we don't need specific permission from the Agency of Natural Resources or FEMA to do that. That being said, we still have permitting obligations that exist, but those obligations are generally met by sizing the structures appropriately.
And there was a time though FEMA would only reimburse to what was there. And that was a core concern because what was there was totally inadequate if you're really thinking about the future risks. Is that still true?
No,
Okay, they did change
If you
that.
do it to the
policy.
standards, you can do bigger.
Yeah, okay.
You're like one or two sizes bigger or whatever, I can't remember now.
yeah, and we'll definitely get into what those are, but yeah.
So FEMA does now reimburse to the, yeah.
Alrighty, a little bit on what we have to do. We have some permanent work sites left, 65 sites remaining. We have to do 16 bridges, 37 culverts, about 10 more slope repairs, a ledge repair, and a retaining wall. Retaining wall repair.
Is that very? Looks kind of like,
Very.
well, it looks like very.
That was much more.
So that's what you're down to right there. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, with all the damage that you've had and that's where you're at right now. That's amazing.
Dedication
Yeah.
and commitment and go.
Well, we just said in Irene, we discovered that there was more native engineering capacity than in this state. I mean, because a lot of local stuff local people came in and it's amazing what they did in a short period of time. Guess we love a challenge.
And then,
December storm.
Yes, and then we had a cloudy, rainy summer, and then not a lot of sun, and then this December, we had a small rain event. And it put us right back into, we activated the Transportation Incident Command Center. We immediately all reported to a room and we started planning. Overall, we did get lucky. There's some quick things here about the rain. Broke all the records. The temperature broke all the records throughout the state. And the snow melt, and then we were back into road closures. And we were very, very blessed with not anywhere near as bad. We were nervous. So we only had, now remember we had 2,000 reportable incidents back in July, and we only had 27 that were of repeat damage for December. So our planning and our resiliency tools and the standards are working. They're working incredibly well. 10 of the 27, the permanent repairs were either not made or the vegetation hadn't fully taken in. It had only been a few months. And so No damage to the rail, no temporary bridge request. We had 40 road closures. There was 12 swiftwater rescues, 150 individual damage sites, and there was around $1 million of damage on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail extra during the December flood. And I believe if you folks don't have any questions for me, this is where Jeremy gets into the meat and potatoes. Alrighty, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ernie. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer. So thanks for having me. Just going to talk a little bit about our design standards and how we develop resiliency through that. So a lot of what I'll talk about essentially comes down to three things: resiliency through upsizing the structures, whether it be culverts or bridges, resiliency through redundancy, and then resiliency through deep foundation designs. And so what I mean by that is that the support of the bridge is deep and not shallow at, say, the river bed elevation. So just because it was brought up earlier, like Route 107, you mentioned Stockbridge was one of the last sections to open up. So that actually wasn't a section that was damaged during Irene. So what we saw, generally speaking, throughout the July storm is that a lot of the areas that were damaged were areas that weren't damaged during Irene, so they didn't have our permanent fixes. If you look at on 107 during Irene, we had that big sort of arcing corner where the whole thing slid. No damage there during the July floods. Likewise, down on 131 in Cavendish, we had what we called the Cavendish Cavern at the time, right? That largely was untouched. So there was sort of these fill-in spots during July that didn't see any damage during Irene.
So what did you do with Irene? I mean, because obviously the geography is a challenge. So what were some of the engineering features?
So each site was probably a little bit different, but generally speaking, the stone fill we used, it was much more faceted, right? So we didn't just take round stone fill that could sort of just roll out of its place. We had faceted, meaning it has a bunch of faces, so it sort of locks in there. We key the stone in deeper, so it doesn't just end at the river's bed. It goes down 4, 6, 8 feet sometimes, and then there's a keyway there, and that's part of the redundancy baked into the resiliency. Likewise, when we lay a slope back, again on 107, that upslope is laid back, so very well armored. As you probably know, there's a lot of vegetation starting to come back there, but there's a significant bed of stone and gravel holding that bank back. So just to touch on culvert sizing a little bit, and let me just go back to this slide. So the picture, I know it's a little bit tough, but this is a project we did 5 or 6 years ago. The bottom picture shows what was there, and that's roughly a 10-foot culvert, for instance. And then the top picture shows what was left, and that's, I think, a 110-foot bridge. And you can see sort of the natural stream banks. So not only does the design allow for hydraulic capacity, but also aquatic organism passage and, mammalian, transfer, being vegetated in a natural body. So there's multiple benefits to upsizing these structures.
Jeremy, everybody's an expert, right? Everybody's an expert. Sometimes we are and everybody else is. And we're hearing this all the time now that we need to get back to dredging.
Yeah.
We need to do that. We need to do that. Did we ever do that? And is there, just to help us with some of the common sense answers that we could come back with?
Sure. So Agency Natural Resources can provide more detail here, but the long story short is dredging doesn't work because all it does is largely move the problem downstream, right? So when you incise the bank, and let me go to my next culvert or picture here, right? So when you incise the bank and turn it into a hallway, the velocity increases, but the same volume of water has to go through there. And then when it gets to a place that isn't dredged, that's where you see your damage, right? So you actually increase the velocity, which is the damaging thing here, right? So if you have those wide floodplains, Ernie talked about the larger watersheds, don't see a lot of that damage. It takes a long time for it to come up, but then it goes down. And to some extent, leaves an undamaged, floodplain. Dredging counteracts that. Dredging causes fast river in a confined space. Now, that being said, there are times when gravel bars or whatever develop during a flood, and there's advantages to partially remove them. And certainly the Agency of Natural Resources and our hydraulics folks can talk about the details of that. But that's the short answer from an engineering perspective.
Still a lot of piles of stuff on those cornfields.
Well, I think the place that I noticed it was in your area on 302 down through there, it's just a massive amounts of sand and all those fields, all where those bridges got washed out. It's like, where in the heck did all that sand come from? It's just unbelievable.
That's on Route
Well,
2.
like
Route 2, I mean, yeah.
like where that bridge picture, we have other places near where I live where just like basically whole mountains are gone. So that's like amazing amounts of rock and sand that ended up somewhere downstream.
And I think
Fields.
and I think those are the times when we do go in and remove some of those gravel bars, because there's just a huge amount of sediment that comes downstream, and it does counteract the idea of a floodplain because it actually blocks it and gets deposited there.
I think also I hear more about that in the governor's and the administration's resilient strategy that was just announced last week too. They're definitely working on the floodplains and enhancing them.
So that was an announcement to do a plan, right? Am I remembering that correctly? By July to have the plan written? The thing that with the treasure, is that the one thing you're talking about?
Yes. Not sure,
I
but
think that's,
it's definitely part of it.
we're planning to do a plan, is what I got out of it.
Talking about talking. So these are updated culvert standards that we have, and again, these, to Senator Ingalls' point, have been agreed upon by both Agency of Natural Resources, the Army Corps of Engineers, and DTrans. And so for different criteria of roadway, we have slightly different checks. But long story short, the culvert span, so the width of the culvert, we try to make bank full width, which is generally the width of the stream upstream and downstream at the ordinary high water level. The height of the culvert is again, generally speaking, passes the design flood with some freeboard, and a lot of times that freeboard's a foot. So for an interstate culvert, we would look to pass the 100-year flood event with about a foot of freeboard, and that's how we would size that culvert. A local road, obviously less important to some extent, and that's a 25-year flood event. Now, that being said, the flood check that you see there, what that means is that the road won't overtop. So perhaps not all the water goes through, but there's still resiliency in that the road won't be overtopped. So again, interstate and state highways, interstate has 200-year flood check, and then state highways and local roads, 100-year flood check.
And does that change with each flood? Like if it gets higher, like how often do you change what the 100-year flood is?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact answer to that, but I'll say a flood event has a lot of variables based on the watershed. So it's not just the amount of rain, it's what is the topography of the watershed, what is its size, what is its gradient. So I honestly don't know the answer to that, if they've changed the models for precipitation, but that's only one input. The size and the gradient and the amount of impervious area within the watershed also plays into it. So I will say that I believe we calculate the flood event every time we do a project, but whether those inputs change, I think they probably do over time, but I don't know that there's a cycle.
Because you'd hope so, since we're getting more and more rain.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to get back to you on that answer.
So is the box culvert preferred?
Yeah.
Not just for the other ecological benefits.
Exactly. So generally speaking, an open bottom is preferred. Some of the smaller ones, it'll be a 4-sided box, but then we'll put sills in there so that there can be a natural bottom, and we try to fill that, with size stone that's dense enough to keep the water up, but
Not to wash away.
exactly, but big enough so that it doesn't wash away. So similar discussion for bridges. Again, interstates, 100-year flood event, state highways 50-year flood event, and local roads a 25-year flood event. A couple things here additionally though, is that we look for adverse flooding impacts upstream and downstream. And all of our bridges will be designed to satisfy the FEMA floodplain and floodway regulations. And they're also designed to withstand scour and erosion forces. So again, we look at the makeup of the stream bed and we design it for that. And something that I mentioned earlier, again, our first choice is to use deep foundations. The picture on the right here is an example where this is in Braintree. It's a town highway actually during Irene. And the bridge stayed. We had to fix the abutment and backfill the road, but at the end of the day, we didn't have to reinvest on that bridge. And you can see the deep foundation kind of sticking up there.
And that foundation is just embedded right down in the bedrock of the.
Yeah, whether it be bedrock or 40 or so feet down into soil, each site's a little bit different, but essentially we designed that to be a freestanding structure and take all those forces I talked about with a certain amount of scour gone. So again,
even if the abutments are gone, the bridge could stay.
yeah, so well, the intent here is that the abutments would stay, it's just the backfill behind the abutments would be gone. And that's what you see here is the bridge abutments just sort of sticking out there like a sore thumb, but the bridge is fully intact, and as soon as we backfill it, will be fully functional.
And that's what seemed like a lot of damage I saw was the bridge was fine, but there was just no way to get to the bridge.
Exactly, and that's where, to a large degree, that flood check I was talking about, because once the water starts overtopping and eroding, you know, once that sediment starts moving and soil starts moving, it just chases it. So again, new standards will help prevent that.
I wonder how much bedrock Manhattan's on. No, I just, I would
Dang,
hope.
that was like flipping like way to the back.
Think about, with, the water level there is a problem, and I know they're engineering to it, but I just wonder, yeah, carrying a lot of weight. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm just meandering. I'm thinking more globally,
Sure.
actually.
Understood. So this is a spreadsheet, just or a slide showing what goes into our scour evaluations. As we've seen, scour is one of the principal causes of damage, and so we have bridge inspection data. We've got the ANR phase 1 and phase 2 geomorphic assessment. We've got the transportation research planning data, and then USGS tools. And so what we do is we feed that all in and look at the probability of events, the cost of failure, project prioritization, and the probability of events. And what we get is the Scour Critical Bridges Dashboard and Risk Assessment. And so this is a statewide collection that shows the structures that we think are scour critical. Now, scour critical for us means either we know that they are not scour resistant, or we just don't know that they are. So to reverse that, this is every structure that we don't know necessarily is scour resistant. And then, the table to the left there just talks about different mitigation strategies, whether it be just monitoring, it could be additional stone fill, or other countermeasures. And so this is one of those slides we use to help weigh sort of the public need and available resources when we're determining scour and resiliency.
So what percentage of our bridges are assessed as scour resistant?
Yeah, so percentage.
Is that on your dashboard? I can't see.
Yeah, so it has a total number. It doesn't have a percentage. And again, this is statewide, so the numbers are going to be a little bit skewed. But yeah, my eyes aren't that good either. I can't see the number of bridges, but it is there. And I will say from the state system, there aren't a lot. Most of it is the town system. So one of the numbers you see there, right here actually, so the minimum age of a scour critical structure is 2 years. The average age is 80.3. So again, some of those structures are nearing the end of their anticipated life. And then the max age is 183. My guess is that's a laid up stone abutment on a covered bridge somewhere, would be my guess. So that sort of shows the demographic of the Scour critical bridges.
I think that bridge is dead. Doesn't it say rest in peace?
It does. And so, again, this is the opposite of the previous slide. Yeah, okay, so this is Route 73 in Rochester. That's Route 100, you know, where the trucks are parked there. And that's an example of a not successful scour prevention. Just as an FYI, when we replace that, that is on a deep foundation now. So the side next to Route 100 is on bedrock, and then the side that's actually in the water now is on a deep foundation in the mountain piles. So that's what I have for design standards and baked in resiliency. Are there any questions?
No, great presentation so far.
Thank you. One question, I don't know if it's for you or somebody else, but is there part of this, I mean, you're obviously focused on your own infrastructure, but do you ever look at, you know, conserving land that just would help just the general floodplain? It might help a bridge 2 miles down the road if you can let the river flood into this. So is there resources that AOT has to like buy easements?
Yeah. So we do have a handful, and Andrea can probably talk a little bit more about that. So we do have some floodplain restoration components to our projects, and I think we've got a project in Bennington. Michelle, is that correct? Brattleboro?
I can't remember.
But we do have a project where, as part of our infrastructure project, we are doing some floodplain sort of restoration.
So the federal, you can use the federal money for those kind of things, even though they might not be directly tied to a bridge abutment.
Within bounds,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it probably has to be basically contiguous, and it can't be 3 miles downstream. It has to be either adjacent. And again, that's where the standards help us, because we build in a lot of that redundancy and stewardship of the environmental resources within our projects.
And we also participate in the interagency group for EMA grant reviews. So we're participating from a transportation perspective on those. And, you know, a lot of those are buyouts right now, really huge focus on buyouts. And so we have been talking with them a little bit about taking over some of the responsibilities on lands where they're around our infrastructure and where they would be a benefit for the transportation system in the future. Some towns, most towns are okay with taking that land over from a buyout, but there's times when they're not, and so we're definitely.
You mean like you would buy it out and then give it to the town? So,
Or we would keep it and maintain it for ourselves,
And they would be
because
okay with
because
that.
it would help our infrastructure be more resilient in the future.
largely done through easements, I would assume, just like preventing anything else to get built.
Yeah.
Can you put the standards in historical context? Were they needing to be updated a couple of years ago? Are these fairly recently revised? What was the, do you remember that, where we were talking about the need to?
The Vermont state standards,
And
yeah.
that's really.
Those
what
are
we-
like the overarching design standards for all activities we do in the
Is this a
transportation
component
system.
of that?
It relates, and I think that they probably fit in. We're gonna be coming in and talking about the update of the standards on Friday. But Jeremy, you might.
Yeah,
speak.
so the Vermont state standards are more about the geometry of the road and less about some of this type stuff. So a lot of this is built into the structures manual and the hydraulics manual. I think after Irene, and I'm trying to pull from memory here, there was a concerted effort to do an update, but then since then, it's less like every 5 years we have to do it, and more just a continuous improvement type exercise where, okay, we're seeing.
You gotta make it as dynamic as our weather is.
Exactly, right? So we try to learn from every event. There's not a predictable cycle, but as information comes out, either at the national or state level, we try to incorporate that into our design requirements.
Okay, let's take a
And was
5-minute
this-
break. Okay,
for one
right,
quick-
go ahead. Yep.
Was this bridge damaged on the left and then, or was just like, it was just up for?
Yeah, so what this is, so this is Route 12 in Bethel. And so the left is right after Irene, and it's a little tough, but in the distance you see a white bank.
Yeah.
And so during Irene, that entire bank sort of collapsed and the river was, as you can see, entirely on the left side of that pier,
Right.
which is not its natural location. And so when did we do this? 2020 or so, 2021, we built a new bridge. And so we incorporated deep foundations. But the other notable thing here, obviously, historically, we would put a pier sort of at mid-span because it breaks up the spans and it's a little bit savings on the superstructure. Now we try to avoid that for obvious reasons. And so you'll see the two piers kind of on the, what would be kind of a, it's not even an ordinary high water, but it's the extent of the
Bank to bank.
yeah, bank to bank, and they're on deep foundations. So certainly a lot more resiliency built into this structure. And by not having the pier in the center of the channel, as Andrea mentioned, debris is not getting caught, causing upstream effects and velocity increases as it goes through.
Okay,